Welcome to a time long ago, a time when the world seemed peaceful. Yet beneath that calm surface, great changes were already stirring. The year is 1914, and the gentle hum of daily life still echoes in the streets of many quiet towns and cities across Europe. The scent of fresh bread wafts through the air, and children's laughter fills the streets as they play. In homes, families gather for dinner, sharing stories, and there is a sense of harmony. The world, though full of its own struggles, seems to move slowly, like the steady ticking of an old grandfather clock. But, as often happens in the stories of history, this tranquility is only a fleeting moment. The echoes of distant drums, rumors of conflicts, unrest, and rising tensions begin to filter into everyday life. These were sounds not yet heard by most, though there were whispers in the streets. People continued with their daily routines, perhaps unaware of the changes coming. At the time, the average person was more concerned with the chores and joys of their day-to-day existence than with the grand events unfolding on the world stage. Now, imagine yourself in a little village, nestled somewhere in the heart of Europe. The sun is setting, casting a golden glow over the fields, and the evening breeze carries the faint scent of blooming flowers and freshly cut grass. In the distance, the occasional sound of a horse-drawn carriage rumbles along the cobblestone streets. The quiet hum of evening life swells gently as the stars begin to twinkle above, lighting up the night sky. Little did anyone know that in just a few short years, the landscape of daily life would change forever. The world wars would soon arrive, sweeping through countries, towns, and villages, turning normal routines upside down and altering the course of history in ways that could not be predicted. But for now, in this peaceful moment, let's pause and take a deep breath, knowing that the world is, for now, still at peace. As the years pass, the winds of change are subtle at first. People continue to work the land, craft goods, and gather with family. It's a time when the simple joys of life hold a special place in the hearts of many. But soon, the world will find itself at the crossroads of something that will shake every corner of existence, something called war. Yet, for now, in this quiet space, we remain focused on the simple comforts. Women gather at the village square with baskets of vegetables. The aroma of freshly baked bread and roasted meats fills the air as the day comes to a close. The rhythm of life in these moments is so very gentle, so very routine. And in the comfort of this simplicity, we allow ourselves to be lulled into a state of calm, where the cares of the world seem distant and the beauty of these moments feels eternal. The year is 1914, and while the gentle rhythm of village life continues, just a whisper away, something unsettling is brewing. The world, for all its peacefulness, is edging closer to a new kind of conflict. And as the first signs of war begin to appear on the horizon, life begins to subtly shift. But in the early days, it is still the small details of life that take center stage. At home, there is an undercurrent of unease, but for many, the war seems like something distant, something that will not touch them directly. But soon, the men of the villages are called to enlist, to march to the front lines, and the landscape of daily life changes. Women, once focused on the care of their homes and families, now find themselves at the center of an entirely different kind of life. Across cities and small towns, the atmosphere is one of quiet determination. Homes are filled with letters written to soldiers far away, some filled with news from home, others offering prayers for a safe return. Shops display posters encouraging the purchase of war bonds. Everything feels slightly different now, touched by the periphery of war, but still there is a sense of the ordinary. But for those who are left behind, life still holds a comforting consistency. The daily routines continue. The morning sun rises over the village, and people go about their work, gathering firewood, mending clothes, and sharing a meal with family. The sights and sounds of the world remain the same, but there is now a silent understanding that things are changing, even if those changes are only felt on the edges. In the fields, the harvests continue, and the rhythm of the earth's cycles remains steady. But soon, more and more soldiers depart for the front, and the void left behind begins to change the landscape of the home front. Now, women take on new roles, working in factories, filling jobs once reserved for men. The pace of life quickens, but there is still a sense of resilience, a quiet courage among those who remain at home. Soon, as the years roll on, even the simplest tasks, mending a sweater, washing dishes, or gathering firewood, become small acts of defiance against the world that is now in chaos. These quiet, everyday tasks become symbols of strength, and for those who continue to live life despite the war, there is a gentle pride in knowing that even as everything changes, the rhythm of life persists as the war continues its relentless march across the continents. There is a profound shift happening back home. The men, those who once filled the streets, the farms, and the factories, have been called away, leaving behind a vast emptiness. In their absence, the women of the world step forward. But their heroism, while deeply woven into the fabric of life on the home front, is not always seen, not always celebrated in the same way as the soldiers marching off to battle. Yet, the sacrifices and contributions of women during the war years are quietly heroic, and it is in their everyday actions that the heart of the home front beats. At first, many women are hesitant to step into the roles left vacant by the men who have gone to fight, but necessity soon becomes their guide. Women take over the farming duties, planting and harvesting crops, tending to animals, and ensuring that the food supply continues uninterrupted. It is said that, in some villages, women worked the land with a strength that rivaled the men who once worked there. They knew the land as intimately as their own homes, and with the war pulling the men away, it became their responsibility to carry on. In the cities, women step into factories, many of them learning new trades overnight. In a factory where heavy machinery once hummed under the hands of men, now women are rolling up their sleeves, taking on the tough mechanical work that was once thought of as unsuitable for them. They operate looms, assemble ammunition, and work in the munitions factories, all the while wearing expressions of quiet determination. Their hands, once familiar with the gentler tasks of homemaking, now become skilled in the art of production, crafting the weapons that would make their way to the soldiers fighting at the front. For these women, life is both harder and more meaningful than before. They still care for their families, still send letters to the men at the front, but they are also contributing in ways that would forever change their roles in society. Some women take up the roles of nurses, tending to the wounded soldiers, both in makeshift hospitals near the front lines and in hospitals back home. The scent of antiseptic fills the air, and the soft murmur of comforting words spoken to soldiers words of hope, words of strength, becomes a part of their daily rhythm. And yet, in these hospitals, these women offer more than care. They offer a piece of their hearts, knowing that each life saved is another victory, another step toward peace. And yet, life continues to unfold in all its usual rhythms. In the small villages, life goes on, albeit with a different kind of pace. Women not only keep homes running, but also keep their families' spirits alive. They become the backbone of their communities, leading fundraising efforts, gathering materials for soldiers' clothing, and writing letters of support. There are even knitting circles, where women gather not only to create warm garments for the soldiers, but also to offer each other solace in the quiet companionship of a shared task. These circles of quiet solidarity are more than just about creating warmth for the men at the front. They are about knitting together the very fabric of society that the war threatens to tear apart. In the evenings, women gather around the warmth of a fire or under the glow of an oil lamp to share stories. The chatter of everyday life, the laughter of children, and the hum of hands at work blend together in a soothing harmony. For them, even amidst the chaos and uncertainty, there is still the calm comfort of home, sitting at the table with a cup of tea or sharing a meal with those who remain. It is here, in these quiet, unspoken moments, that the true strength of the home front is woven. For the children who remain at home, the war is an ever-present shadow, though they may not always understand its full weight. Their games take on a new flavor as they play war-related games with sticks and makeshift tools, mimicking the soldiers they see in the posters or in their imaginations. In the midst of these small, innocent pastimes, there is a sense of wanting to connect with the world beyond. They send messages to the soldiers, drawing pictures or writing letters, hopeful that their small acts of kindness will reach their fathers, brothers, and uncles far away. But even in the quiet hum of everyday life, there are moments that hint at the larger world beyond. Occasionally, news of battles, victories, and losses reach the villages. A letter might arrive, bringing word from the front, or a telegram might arrive, carrying the kind of news no one wishes to hear. Yet through it all, the women, the children, and those who remain on the home front continue with unshaken resilience. They carry the weight of the war quietly, each person doing their part, from their small home to the vast factories and fields that stretch across the land. And so, despite the sorrow, despite the hardships, there is a steadfast belief that peace will one day return. These quiet, everyday heroes, the women of the home front, stand not only as symbols of endurance, but as the quiet force that sustains the heart of a nation. Their lives, though seemingly simple, carry a legacy that echoes through time, a legacy of quiet strength and resilience in the face of unspoken challenges. As the world drifts deeper into the war, a subtle transformation takes place. Not just on the front lines, where soldiers are engaged in battles, but behind the scenes, in the quiet workshops, factories, and laboratories where new ideas are born. The world wars, despite their devastation, become a catalyst for rapid technological advancements. These changes, while they may seem distant and detached from the ordinary life of people on the home front, are profoundly shaping the world in ways that will last long after the final gunfire has faded. In the early years of the war, the technology available to soldiers and their nations was rudimentary. The first tanks, for instance, were clunky and slow, made of steel and iron, and they lumbered across the battlefield like great iron behemoths. The airplanes that appeared on the scene were small, fragile contraptions, barely able to carry a pilot across the skies, let alone engage in combat. The weapons used in these early battles were large and unwieldy, slow to reload, and often inefficient. But as the war dragged on, so too did the need for innovation. The pressures of war drive the need for faster, more efficient machines, and these needs fuel an explosion of new technologies. Engineers, mechanics, and scientists, both on the battlefield and in quiet laboratories far from the front, begin to develop tools and techniques that will change not only the war, but the world itself. At first, it is the introduction of new machinery that catches the world's attention. The first tanks, clumsy and slow, are gradually refined, becoming faster, more agile, and more powerful. They are adapted for different kinds of terrain, and soon they play a crucial role in breaking through enemy lines. Likewise, the airplane evolves from a fragile early contraption to a sleek, efficient fighter. The development of the machine gun, which had been around for a while, is further refined, making it deadlier and more effective than ever before. But it is in the realm of communication and medicine that some of the most profound changes occur. Radio communication becomes a key factor in coordinating efforts on the battlefield, with messages being sent from commanders to soldiers in real time, allowing for more strategic and organized operations. Meanwhile, medical advancements begin to revolutionize the care of soldiers and civilians alike. The development of antiseptics, improved surgical techniques, and the use of X-rays for the first time all contribute to saving countless lives during and after the war. But it is not just in the weapons and machines that the world sees change. The very way people communicate with one another undergoes a revolution. In earlier years, it could take days or weeks for a letter to reach a soldier at the front. But with the advent of the radio, messages that once took days to be delivered now travel in the blink of an eye. Radio operators, stationed both behind the lines and on the battlefield, send messages that help coordinate the movement of troops, the placement of supplies, and the strategy of entire armies. This technology, which once seemed like a far-off dream, becomes a lifeline in the chaos of war. And for those at home, it means they can hear news of the war, of victories, of losses, of their loved ones, more quickly than ever before. The radio becomes the link between the front lines and the home front, allowing families to listen to broadcasts, hear the latest updates, and feel connected to the ongoing struggle, even though they are miles away. In the midst of these technological advancements, life on the home front continues in its own steady rhythm. Though the pace has quickened with the needs of war, the basic human desire for comfort, for connection, and for continuity remains unchanged. The women working in factories, the farmers toiling in the fields, and the children playing in the streets. They are all still living in a world that, while forever altered, continues in many ways just as it always has. They are touched by the advancements being made, of course, but the daily rituals of life, the preparation of meals, the care of loved ones, the shared laughter of friends, remain a steady constant, even as the world changes around them. And as the war stretches on, these small moments of continuity become even more significant. as much as the world is being transformed by the forces of industry and innovation, there is something deeply human about the everyday acts of love and care that continue, unbroken. It is in these moments, perhaps, that we find the greatest reminder of the resilience of the human spirit, of how, even in the face of immense change, the heart of daily life beats on, steady and true. As these technological advancements begin to take shape, a sense of inevitability settles over the world. The war, while still devastating, has brought with it the seeds of change. The tools of war, it turns out, are not just instruments of destruction, but also of creation, creating new industries, new ways of thinking, and new possibilities for the future. The whispers of these advancements are felt in every corner of the globe, from the quiet laboratories where scientists tinker away at their inventions, to the bustling factories where men and women work side by side to build the machines of tomorrow. The future, though still clouded by the haze of war, is beginning to come into focus. And it is a future that will carry the echoes of these quiet innovations long after the conflict has ended. As we rest here in this soft space of time, let us remember that even in the most tumultuous of moments, the world continues to evolve. Change comes not always in the form of great dramatic shifts, but in quiet, steady steps that build upon each other, just like the advances we've seen here. And just as these changes will shape the world after the war, they too will become part of the quiet, steady rhythm of life that persists, no matter how great the challenges. In the years that stretch between the sounds of marching armies, the fields and homes of the homefront stand as quiet sentinels, bearing witness to the unseen struggles of wartime life. It is a time when life feels suspended between hope and fear, between daily chores and the whispered stories of soldiers far away. The peaceful routines of yesterday are now colored by the presence of war, and yet, in many ways, life on the home front still goes on. The rhythms of daily existence continue, perhaps slower, perhaps with a heaviness, but they persist nonetheless. In the early mornings, the air is cool with the touch of dawn. The rooster crows, waking the village from its slumber, and the first light of the sun spreads across the fields, casting long shadows over the houses. Farmers, both men and women, begin their day before the sun has fully risen, their boots crunching in the dew-covered grass. They walk out into the fields, the soil soft beneath their feet, and for a moment, all is as it has always been. There is something timeless in the simplicity of planting seeds, of tending crops, and of ensuring that the land continues to provide. But as the day wears on, there is an underlying urgency to every task. The pressures of war weigh heavily on everyone. The crops that are grown must be enough to feed soldiers, civilians, and families alike. The women working in factories must meet the ever-increasing demands for munitions and supplies. The children, in their own small ways, are learning to adapt to a world shaped by conflict, understanding that their actions, too, are contributing to the cause. In the villages, life becomes a balancing act. The rhythm of the day is often dictated by the call of the factory or the needs of the farm. Yet, as the hours tick by, the deep-rooted desire for normalcy endures. Women in the kitchen stir pots of soup over an open flame, their hands moving as though they are still preparing meals for loved ones who will return at the end of the day, as they have always done. In these homes, even the simplest acts take on a sense of profound meaning. A freshly baked loaf of bread is not just nourishment, it is a symbol of hope, a reminder that despite the hardships, life continues. The fire crackles, the kettle hums, and the warmth of the hearth offers a sense of security. At the same time, there is a quiet understanding that things are changing. The once familiar rhythms of family life are now interrupted by the sound of telegrams arriving with news from the front. Sometimes the news is good. Letters from a son, a father, a brother, telling of victories or providing updates on the mundane details of life in the trenches. Other times, the news is filled with sorrow, and families are forced to face the quiet, aching void left by a loved one's absence. Yet, even in these moments, the resilience of the home front shines through. For in every home, every village, every town, life continues to unfold. Each small act, each shared moment of laughter or quiet sorrow becomes a thread in the tapestry of life during wartime. Throughout the day, the quiet chores of the home front continue. Children play in the streets, their laughter echoing through the air, even as they, too, understand that the world around them is changing. Their games are more serious now, resembling soldiers preparing for battle, their toy guns held high, their faces set in quiet determination. In the absence of their fathers, they become the future protectors, the future soldiers of the next generation, even if they don't fully understand the weight of that responsibility. At the factories, where women and older men work alongside one another, the rhythm of the workday is steady and deliberate. The machines hum as they produce the ammunition, the rifles, the tanks that will eventually make their way to the front lines. The work is hard, often dangerous, but there is a sense of quiet pride in the knowledge that the effort, the sweat, and the fatigue will help ensure that their soldiers are well equipped to face the challenges ahead. The women here do not merely fill in for the men. They are the lifeblood of the war effort. Without them, the machinery of war would grind to a halt. They are the quiet hands that feed the machine, the unsung heroes of the home front. And though their labor may go unnoticed by many, there is something profound in knowing that they, too, are shaping the course of history. And so, as the days stretch into weeks and the weeks into months, life on the home front continues. The rhythm may have changed, but the heart of life remains steady. It beats in the kitchens, in the fields, in the factories, and in the hearts of those who remain behind. And even as the world around them is transformed by the forces of war, the resilience, the quiet courage, and the unspoken strength of the home front remains unbroken. In these small, everyday moments, the shared smiles, the acts of kindness, the comfort of a warm meal, the reassurance of a letter from the front, there is something timeless, something that transcends the turmoil of the world. For it is in these quiet struggles, these humble acts of perseverance, that the true strength of the home front is found. And as night falls, bringing with it a soft silence, we find peace in knowing that the daily rhythms of life, no matter how changed, continue to carry us through, one moment at a time. As the war stretches on, a quiet transformation unfolds in the hearts of communities. The world, torn as it is by conflict, finds unexpected strength in the unity of its people. Those who remain on the home front, bound by shared purpose and a common struggle, form bonds that transcend the typical lines of society. Neighbors help neighbors, strangers become friends, and the fabric of daily life is held together not just by the hands that labor, but by the spirit of community that unites them. It's in the small acts of kindness, the quiet sacrifices, and the unspoken solidarity that the true power of these communities is revealed. Whether it's an elderly woman sharing her last loaf of bread with a young family, or children running errands for their parents so they can continue working, these are the unsung moments that carry the weight of the war. The bonds forged during these times of hardship would last far beyond the last shot fired, shaping the way people would view their communities for generations to come. But amidst the quiet resilience of these communities, there is also the weight of scarcity. War brings with it not just the loss of life, but the loss of many comforts that were once taken for granted. Rationing becomes a way of life. The once abundant shelves of markets now look bare, and people are forced to find creative ways to make do with less. At home, families carefully measure out their weekly rations, ensuring that there is enough for everyone. A small loaf of bread, once easily consumed in a single sitting, now lasts several days. A portion of meat, once a simple part of the evening meal, becomes a rare treat. Butter, sugar, and flour, luxuries of the past, are now saved for special occasions or carefully guarded as precious resources. The women, often the ones tasked with stretching these meager supplies, become experts in frugality. They make do with what they have, transforming leftovers into hearty soups, finding ways to make a little bit of food go a long way. They repurpose old clothes, patching and mending them until they are as good as new, not just for their own families, but for their neighbors too. In this time of scarcity, nothing goes to waste, and everything is used with the utmost care. Yet, despite these hardships, there is a spirit of generosity that pervades the communities. When one family has a little extra, they share it. When a neighbor is in need, they offer whatever they can. The local markets, although limited in their selection, become places of barter and trade, where goods are exchanged not just for money, but for favors, for kindness, for the bonds of community. It is a time when every small gesture feels monumental, when a simple act of generosity can carry the weight of 1,000 words. This spirit of giving extends far beyond the home front. The soldiers at the front, too, feel the reach of these small acts of kindness. Letters from home, though short and simple, carry a message of hope and love. Packages filled with homemade goods, knitted scarves, socks, and sweets are sent off to soldiers, reminding them of the world they left behind. These small comforts, sent with love, bring a sense of warmth in the midst of the cold and uncertainty of war. But rationing isn't just confined to food. Every aspect of daily life is touched by the need to conserve. Gasoline, clothing, and even paper are carefully rationed. Clothing is patched and mended, shoes are resoled, and everything is used until it can no longer serve its purpose. People learn to make do with less, but in doing so, they find strength in their ability to adapt and survive. The act of rationing, of finding ways to make do, becomes not just a necessity, but a way of life. It becomes a reflection of the resilience that lies deep within the heart of each person on the home front. And though the scarcity can feel heavy at times, there is an unspoken understanding that every small sacrifice, every little effort to save, is helping to bring the world one step closer to peace. The children, too, begin to understand the importance of these sacrifices. They are not immune to the changes around them, but they adapt with surprising grace. Their playtime becomes a reflection of the war's presence. Games of postman as they deliver letters, or pretending to be soldiers working together to defend the home front. They too are learning the value of community, of cooperation, and of sacrifice. Their innocence remains, but they are growing into a generation that knows the weight of conflict and the strength it takes to endure. And as night falls, the quiet rhythm of the community persists. The day's work is done, and families settle into their homes, gathering around the hearth, enjoying the simple pleasures of togetherness. In the evenings after the work is done, the community comes alive in small, intimate gatherings, whether it's a shared meal, a song sung by candlelight, or a quiet chat with neighbors over a cup of tea. These moments, these small acts of solidarity, provide a deep well of comfort, a reminder that even in the darkest times, the bonds that tie people together are stronger than any hardship. So, as you lie in the comfort of your own space, remember the quiet strength of those who lived through these times. Their stories may not always be loud or celebrated, but they are the foundation of the peace that followed. In the stillness of the night, let their resilience, their spirit of giving, and their quiet determination guide you toward restful sleep. As the war stretches into its final years, a new kind of weariness settles over the land. The soldiers at the front have endured unimaginable hardship, and those at home have carried their own burdens, quietly, patiently, without complaint. The days, filled with toil and sacrifice, now feel endless, as if time itself has slowed in response to the heavy weight of war. But even in the darkest moments, the hope for peace lingers, like a soft light on the horizon, always just out of reach, yet never entirely extinguished. Then, one day, it happens. News begins to trickle in, slowly at first, then all at once. The war is ending. Victory is within sight. The battlefields, once filled with the thunder of artillery, are now quiet. The soldiers who have fought so bravely will soon return home. Families begin to feel the first stirrings of relief, like the soft sigh of a world exhaling after years of tension. For those on the home front, the news is bittersweet. There is joy, of course, that the war is finally ending, but there is also a quiet sorrow, a deep understanding that the scars of war, both seen and unseen, will remain long after the final peace treaties are signed. The community, once bonded together in the struggle, now faces the challenge of rebuilding not just homes and farms, but hearts and minds. The streets, which had once echoed with the hurried steps of soldiers heading to the front, are now filled with returning men, young and old, some with the weight of the world on their shoulders, others filled with relief, their faces carrying the exhaustion of years spent far from home. They come home to families who have changed, to children who have grown up in their absence, to a world that has moved on without them, even as they fought to protect it. And yet, even as they return, there is no grand celebration. Not at first. The war has left its mark, not just on the landscape, but on the hearts of those who lived through it. The home front's victory is a quiet one, filled with the sounds of families reuniting, of tears and laughter, of hugs and gentle reassurances. It is a victory that comes not from grand gestures, but from the small, everyday acts of love and care that sustained the home front through the long years of struggle. The first steps of returning soldiers are tentative, as though they are still unsure of their place in this new world. They've been gone so long, and the world they return to is not quite the same as the one they left behind. Some carry the weight of loss, their minds haunted by the horrors they witnessed on the front lines. Others are filled with relief, knowing they have survived, but unsure of how to begin again. The women who have held everything together, the mothers, wives, daughters, are ready to embrace their loved ones, but they too have changed. They've learned to navigate the world without the constant presence of their husbands and sons. They've taken on roles they never expected to fill. And now, as the men return, they find themselves facing the quiet uncertainty of how to adjust to a life that has been shaped by war. And yet, amid all the change, there is a quiet joy in simply being together again. There is a tenderness in the way families greet one another, as though they are rediscovering each other for the first time. The simple act of sitting together at the dinner table, once a mundane ritual, now feels like a sacred moment, a celebration of the life that endures, even in the face of great adversity. As the days pass and the full weight of peace settles upon the land, the home front begins its own process of healing. There is no immediate return to normalcy, no sudden relief from the scars of war, but slowly, in the quiet corners of everyday life, the world begins to rebuild itself. Homes are repaired, farms are tended to, and factories, once focused solely on war production, shift back to civilian needs. The scent of fresh bread begins to fill the air once more, and the sound of children playing in the streets returns. But there is something different now, something that was not there before. The war has taught people the true value of peace. It has taught them to cherish the simple moments, the small pleasures, the quiet comfort of being with loved ones. And so, the people of the home front, who have endured so much, find solace in the return to these ordinary rhythms. They understand now, more than ever, that peace is fragile, and it must be nurtured, not taken for granted. The land that was once torn by conflict is now gently healing, the soil once scarred by war slowly returning to life. The faces of those who lived through it all, soldiers, workers, mothers, fathers, children, are etched with the quiet strength of resilience. They have survived, and they will rebuild. As we reflect on the long road of war and peace, we find ourselves drawn not just to the grand narratives of history, but to the quiet, unseen stories that often go untold. The legacies of wartime are not only etched in the headlines of newspapers or the formal speeches of leaders. They are also hidden in the small, everyday actions of ordinary people, those who, without fanfare or recognition, shaped the world in profound and lasting ways. In the villages, in the homes, and in the factories, there are countless untold stories. The woman who quietly sewed the uniforms that would be worn by soldiers on the front lines, not once questioning the work, but doing it with pride and dedication. The young boy, too young to fight, who carried messages across town, his feet quick and sure, delivering news from one family to the next, and the elderly woman, with her hands calloused from years of farm labor, who tended to the wounded soldiers returning home, offering what little comfort she could in the quiet corners of a makeshift hospital. These stories, though often lost in the rush of larger events, form the hidden foundation of our understanding of wartime life. They are the quiet legacies that speak of sacrifice, of resilience, and of a shared humanity that can endure even the darkest of times. It's in these small, forgotten acts that we begin to see the true depth of wartime's impact. Each story, though seemingly insignificant on its own, contributes to the larger tapestry of history. These are the stories that are passed down, often only through whispers and memories, from one generation to the next. They are the silent heroes who did not march into battle, but who carried the weight of war in their own way. And then there are the stories of love, those quiet, tender moments that are etched into the fabric of daily life during wartime. A letter sent from a soldier to his sweetheart, filled with promises of a future they will share once the war is over. The woman who wrote to her husband every day, sending him news of the children, the garden, the small joys that reminded him of home. These letters, these small acts of love and care, are the lifeblood that sustained so many, keeping hope alive even in the darkest of times. Perhaps the most poignant of these stories are those of separation, families torn apart by the war, yet held together by the strength of their bond. The child who waited by the window every day, hoping for the return of their father. The wife who kept the candle in the window, a quiet beacon of hope for her husband, no matter how far away he was. These small, personal rituals, often unspoken but deeply felt, became symbols of endurance, of faith in the face of uncertainty, and of the quiet, unyielding belief that love could transcend even the vast distance created by war. Beyond the personal stories, there are those of quiet defiance. People who, even in the face of overwhelming odds, refused to be broken by the war. These were the ones who found small ways to resist the pressures of war, whether by secretly helping prisoners of war, offering shelter to those displaced by the conflict, or simply maintaining a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos. These acts of quiet rebellion often went unnoticed, overshadowed by the larger battles being fought on the front lines. Yet, they were no less significant. The men and women who chose to stand up, even in small ways, against the horrors of war, became the quiet architects of post-war society. They embodied the spirit of resilience that would eventually lead to healing and reconciliation. It is these stories that are often forgotten, lost in the noise of history. And yet, they remain at the heart of our understanding of what it means to survive, to endure, and to rebuild in the face of great adversity. These stories are not always loud. They do not always demand attention or recognition, but they are the threads that weave through the fabric of wartime life, binding people together in ways that transcend borders, nations, and armies. They are the stories that endure in the quiet corners of our hearts, passed down through generations, carrying with them the lessons of resilience, love, and the quiet strength of the human spirit. And as we rest here tonight, we too are connected to these stories. They live within us, in the quiet moments of our own lives, in the acts of kindness we extend to others, and in the strength we draw from the legacies of those who came before us. Let the quiet, unspoken stories of wartime fill your mind, and may they guide you toward peace, toward rest, and toward the gentle rhythms of sleep. As the world begins to shift into a new era, the scars of war remain, not just on the land, but in the hearts of all those who lived through it. the peace that follows after the final battle, is not the end of the story. Rather, it marks the beginning of a long journey of healing and rebuilding. The world, though forever changed by the tumult of the past, moves forward with the knowledge that the wounds of war, both visible and invisible, will take time to mend. In the cities, where buildings once reduced to rubble are slowly being rebuilt, there is a sense of quiet determination. Streets that had once been scarred by the sounds of bombing now echo with the steady hum of construction. Workers, both men and women, labor together to restore what was lost, to breathe life back into the places they once called home. It is not an easy task, but it is one that is undertaken with the same quiet strength that carried people through the war itself. The world may have changed, but the spirit of resilience, of community, of rebuilding remains. The work is slow and steady, like the rhythm of a heart that has been broken but beats on, finding its way back to its natural pulse. In homes, families begin the delicate process of finding their footing again. The joy of being reunited is tempered by the knowledge that the journey to heal will not be swift. There are quiet conversations late into the night as people share their thoughts, their fears, and their hopes for the future. For some, the trauma of war lingers in their minds, and the weight of those experiences must be carried and understood piece by piece. For others, it is the loss of loved ones that they must come to terms with, their absence a quiet ache in the spaces where they once stood. But it is in the quiet moments of everyday life that healing begins. In the embrace of family, in the simple act of sitting down to a meal together, in the gathering of neighbors to share stories, the process of reconstruction begins. It is not just the rebuilding of buildings or cities, it is the reconstruction of the human spirit, the restoration of hope, and the quiet belief that even after the worst of storms, there is still beauty to be found in the world. In the fields, life begins again in its quiet way. The farmers, who had worked the land under the shadow of war, now return to their daily rituals of planting, harvesting, and tending to the earth. The rhythm of the seasons becomes a steady reminder that life goes on, that the cycles of nature are unaffected by the turmoil of the world. The land, though scarred by the footprints of war, begins to heal. Slowly, the soil that was once ravaged by battle becomes fertile again, ready to yield the fruits of labor. The crops grow strong and tall once more, and with each passing season, the fields bloom in quiet defiance of the destruction that had once swept over them. In these small, everyday acts, planting seeds, nurturing life, watching the earth breathe again, there is a sense of peace that settles into the heart. The land is alive again, and so too are its people, finding strength in the simplicity of the earth beneath their feet. But it is not just the land that needs healing. The hearts of the people, too, are fragile, scarred by years of fear and uncertainty. It is in the quiet gatherings, in the shared stories of those who have lost so much, that the process of healing begins. The village square, once empty and quiet, now fills with the sound of voices, soft and steady, telling tales of courage, of loss, and of hope. These stories, though tinged with sorrow, are also filled with the quiet belief that life will go on, that the sun will rise again tomorrow. And it is in the healing of the land and the heart that the true legacy of wartime lies, not in the victory or the defeat, but in the quiet strength of those who endured, who rebuilt, and who found ways to live again despite everything. The homefront, though often overlooked, was the quiet force that held the world together during the darkest of times. And now, as the years stretch out before them, the people who lived through those days find themselves carrying forward the lessons of resilience, of compassion, and of the deep, enduring strength that lies in community. In the days that follow, the peace that has been won is not just a return to normalcy, it is a new beginning, a chance to create a world built not on the scars of war, but on the hope for a better tomorrow. This new world will be shaped by the quiet heroes of the homefront, by the hands that rebuilt not only the structures of society, but also the bonds between people. These are the unseen legacies of wartime, the stories of those who, in their quiet, everyday actions, laid the foundation for a future that would thrive in peace. As the years unfold in the aftermath of the war, something profound begins to take shape. Something that is not immediately obvious, but grows quietly in the hearts and minds of those who lived through the great conflict. It is the rebirth of hope, the subtle renewal of faith in a world that, despite its wounds, still holds the promise of something better. The scars of war remain, of course, etched into the landscape, into the memories of the soldiers and families who lived through it. But just as nature renews itself after a harsh winter, so too does the human spirit find a way to heal, to adapt, and to rise once again. In the small villages, towns, and cities, life begins anew, not in grand gestures, but in the simple, daily acts of living. The farmers, who have sown seeds into the rich soil, now watch with quiet pride as the crops sprout and grow. The trees, once stripped bare by the storms of war, are now budding with fresh green leaves, stretching toward the sky as if reaching for the future. The air, once thick with the dust and smoke of battle, is now fresh and clean, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers and newly plowed fields. In the homes, the act of rebuilding continues, not just in the material sense, but in the emotional and spiritual sense. Families, though forever changed by the war, begin to rebuild their bonds. They find solace in each other's company, in the quiet conversations that stretch into the night, in the shared moments of joy and sorrow. They gather around dinner tables once more, sharing meals and stories, laughter and tears, finding in each other the strength to move forward. The quiet acts of love and care, once interrupted by the chaos of war, are now the foundation upon which new memories are built. For those who have returned from the front lines, the process of rebuilding their lives is not always simple. Many carry invisible scars, memories of the horrors they witnessed, the friends they lost, the battles they fought. Yet, in the quiet corners of their lives, they begin to find solace. Perhaps it's in the sound of birdsong in the morning, or the simple act of sitting beside the fire with their families. It is in these small, everyday comforts that they find their way back to themselves, to the lives they had once known. For the women who stayed behind, those who carried the weight of the homefront, the return of the soldiers is a moment of quiet reconciliation. They too have been changed by the war. They've taken on new roles, learned new skills, and found strength in the face of hardship. But now, as the soldiers return home, there is a gentle coming together, a meeting of worlds that were once separated. The men, now weary and scarred by their experiences, lean on the strength of the women who have held the homefront steady. And in this quiet unity, They begin to rebuild their lives together, side by side, in ways that were not possible before. Though the process of rebuilding is slow, it is steady. It is in the way that the community comes together to rebuild not just homes and fields, but the very fabric of society. In every small act of kindness, whether it's a neighbor helping to rebuild a house or a community coming together to support a family in need, there is a quiet sense of solidarity. The bonds that were formed during the war, through shared struggle and sacrifice, now become the foundation for a future built on cooperation and mutual support. The children, who have grown up with the shadows of war hanging over them, begin to see a new world unfolding. They play in the fields, their laughter ringing through the air as they run through the same paths their parents once walked. Their innocence is not lost, but tempered by the knowledge that peace is fragile and it must be cherished. They will grow up with stories of resilience, of the quiet heroes who carried their families through the war, and they will carry these stories with them into the future. And so, the quiet rebirth continues, one day at a time, one act of kindness, one small step forward after another. The world is not the same as it once was, but in many ways it is better. It is a world that has been shaped by the strength of the human spirit, by the quiet, everyday heroes who endured, who rebuilt, and who found a way to live again. It is a world where, despite the scars of war, there is still beauty to be found, in the sunrise over the fields, in the warmth of a shared meal, in the laughter of children playing together. It is a world that knows the value of peace and the fragility of life. And yet, it continues, stronger, quieter, and more resilient than ever before. As the years stretch further away from the turbulent days of war, the scars it left upon the land and the people begin to fade. But even as the physical remnants of battle, ruined buildings, scorched fields, and abandoned trenches are slowly replaced by new growth, the echoes of the war linger in the quietest corners of life. These echoes, subtle yet undeniable, shape the world that follows, leaving an indelible mark on future generations. It is a quiet impact, not often seen but felt in the rhythm of everyday life. The war, though over, has changed the very fabric of society. The men who fought, though they may have returned home, carry the weight of their experiences within them, woven into their very being. Their stories, unspoken but understood, linger in the silences, in the way they interact with the world around them. They carry the burden of things seen and done that cannot be easily shared, and in their quiet moments, they wrestle with the ghosts of the past. But in these silences, too, is a form of strength, a strength that transcends words. The quiet man who has seen the horrors of war, who does not speak of his battles, is not necessarily weak. In his silence is the resilience of one who has witnessed the depths of human suffering and has somehow, in his own way, found a path toward healing. For the women who lived through the war, the legacy of those years is also one of transformation. They too were changed by the war, by the roles they took on, by the lives they led in the absence of their husbands, fathers, and sons. When the war ended, they returned to their homes, but the world they returned to was not the same as the one they had left behind. They had learned new skills, taken on new responsibilities, and proved their strength in ways they had never imagined. The quiet revolution that took place on the home front was subtle, but its impact would echo for generations to come. The women who had once been confined to the private sphere of the home were now deeply involved in the fabric of public life. They had shown that they were capable of far more than society had once believed. And as the years passed, they found new ways to weave their voices into the ongoing narrative of a world that was slowly rebuilding itself. Yet even in the midst of their own personal transformation, they too carried the weight of wartime experiences, the silent grief of lost loved ones, the heavy burden of keeping things together while the world around them was torn apart. But they too found ways to heal. Through quiet acts of kindness, through the love they gave to their families, and through the unspoken strength they drew from one another, they contributed to the healing process in ways that may never have been fully recognized, but were always deeply felt. And then there are the children who were too young to understand the full scope of the war, yet felt its impact in ways both seen and unseen. They grew up in the shadow of conflict, in a world where normalcy was forever altered. They played their games with makeshift soldiers, their childhoods marked by the absence of fathers and the presence of a world that had been shaped by war. But as they grew older, they too began to carry the weight of the war, though in different ways. The stories of their parents, the quiet tales of struggle and survival, became part of their own understanding of the world. The lessons of resilience, of endurance in the face of hardship, would shape them as they moved into adulthood. For them, the war was not just a chapter of history, but a lived experience that shaped their values, their relationships, and the world they would create for future generations. They carried the knowledge that peace, though cherished, is fragile and must be protected. And in their own quiet ways, they contributed to the ongoing process of healing and rebuilding, passing on the lessons learned from the war to those who would follow. It is in these quiet echoes, these subtle, everyday impacts, that the true legacy of wartime life lies. The war may have ended, but its influence lives on in the lives of those who survived, in the memories they carry, and in the way they shape the future. The scars, though faded, are still present, and the resilience forged during the hardest of times continues to guide the world forward. Through the quiet stories of families, of communities, and of individuals, the lessons of the past continue to resonate. These are the silent echoes that guide us through the trials of life, reminding us that even in the face of hardship, there is always the possibility of healing, of rebirth, and of moving forward. As time marches forward and the world continues to evolve, there is something deeply powerful about memory. The way it keeps alive the stories of those who have come before us. The war, though it may now be a distant chapter in history, lives on through the memories of those who experienced it. And those memories, passed down through generations, become the silent tribute to the lives that were forever altered by the conflict. Memory is often quiet. It does not shout. It lingers in the spaces between the events that shape us. It is found in the everyday details, the smell of a loved one's jacket, the soft murmur of a lullaby sung at bedtime, the delicate turning of a page in an old family album. These are the moments that carry the weight of history, stored in the hearts of those who remember. and passed along to those who will carry those stories into the future. In small towns and villages across the world, there are memorials, quiet markers of remembrance, where people gather to honor the memory of those who gave their lives or those who endured so much, both on the front lines and on the home front. These quiet places of reflection are not places of grand speeches or declarations, but rather spaces where people can pause, take a deep breath, and remember. It is here, in the silence of these moments, that the true power of memory is felt. For it is in remembering that we ensure the sacrifices of the past are not forgotten, that the strength and resilience of those who lived through the war are honored in a way that transcends words. These quiet memorials are not just for those who died in battle, but for everyone who was affected by the war, the families, the communities, the women, the children, and the soldiers who returned home forever changed. Each name, each face, represents a story that was once lived, and by remembering them, we keep their legacy alive. It is in the telling of these stories, in the sharing of memories, that the past continues to shape the present and the future. Memory, though often silent, carries within it a power that is not easily understood. It is the force that keeps us connected to our roots, that helps us understand who we are and where we come from. The stories of those who lived through the war may be quiet, but they are no less powerful. And it is in the quietest of moments, in the simple act of remembering, that we honor their sacrifices and their strength. In homes, too, the power of memory is felt. It is found in the family albums that sit on shelves, in the faded letters kept in drawers, in the old songs passed down from one generation to the next. These are the threads that bind families together across time, the quiet reminders of the past that live on in the stories shared around dinner tables, in the bedtime stories whispered to children, in the soft light of a candle at night. In these moments, memory is not just a way of looking back, it is also a way of moving forward. By remembering the quiet heroes of the home front, the soldiers who fought, and the families who endured, we are reminded of the strength that resides within us all. The war may have ended long ago, but the lessons of resilience, compassion, and sacrifice are carried with us, shaping the world we live in today. The power of memory also lies in the way it can guide us through challenging times. Just as those who lived through the war found strength in their shared experiences, we too can draw on the memories of the past to help us navigate the struggles of our own lives. The quiet stories of survival and triumph over adversity serve as a reminder that, no matter what obstacles we face, we are never alone. The strength of those who came before us lives on, and it is within us all to carry that strength forward. The war, with all its suffering and hardship, did not just change the landscapes of cities, towns, and battlefields. It changed the very fabric of relationships. The bonds formed between people during wartime, though sometimes forged in the fires of struggle, were often stronger for it. In the quiet moments between battles, in the letters sent home, and in the whispered promises made in the dark, there was an intimacy born of shared experience that no distance could erase. For those who stayed behind, the absence of loved ones at the front created an aching, ever-present void, but it also deepened the connections they had to each other. The wives, mothers, and children who waited, who wrote letters, who kept the home fires burning, formed bonds not just with the men who went to war, but with each other. They became a network of support, each one offering what little they had to help fill the emptiness. Whether it was sharing a meal with a neighbor or tending to someone else's children, these quiet acts of kindness became the glue that held their communities together. When the soldiers returned, it wasn't just the familiar faces they found waiting for them. It was the quiet strength of the relationships they had formed with their families, friends, and neighbors. The love that had been sent through letters, the care that had been passed through the occasional telegram, all became the foundation for their return. It wasn't always spoken, but it was there. The knowledge that no matter how far apart they had never truly been alone. But it was not just those at home who felt the deepening of relationships. For the soldiers who were thrust into the chaos of war, the bonds they formed with their comrades were often ones that could never be replicated in any other circumstance. These men and women who faced death together, who shared both fear and hope, developed relationships that transcended the usual boundaries of friendship. In the trenches, in the fog of battle, they became each other's family. They shared stories, their hopes for the future, their memories of home, and most importantly, their loyalty to each other. There was a profound intimacy in these relationships, a silent understanding that even if the war took everything else from them, they had each other. These bonds, though often unspoken, were the lifeblood of survival. Soldiers would fight not just for victory, but for the person next to them, for the hope that they could both make it out alive. When the war ended, some soldiers returned home to their families, while others remained in their bonds with their comrades, carrying the memories of shared struggles and triumphs into the quiet years that followed. In the years after the war, many veterans found themselves forever changed by the relationships they had forged. Some were unable to return to the relationships they had left behind, finding that they had grown distant from the life they once knew. Others found that the connection they had shared with their families, though stretched thin by time and separation, had only grown stronger in the quiet absence. The quiet change in relationships wasn't limited to soldiers and families. It also extended to communities at large. The shared experience of hardship, the way communities came together to survive, formed lasting bonds that would persist long after the war was over. People who had never spoken before now became lifelong friends. Neighbors helped one another in ways they never had before, whether by sharing resources or offering emotional support. Even after the war ended, this sense of solidarity remained. The trauma of war might have left its invisible scars on the people, but the strength of their relationships became a way to heal. The way they supported one another, both in the darkest days of conflict and in the quiet aftermath, became the foundation for a new kind of peace. It wasn't always easy. There were tears, there was grief, and there were moments of loneliness. But through it all, the communities stood firm. And in their standing together, they rebuilt not only their homes, but also the relationships that defined their lives. These relationships, born from the ashes of war, did more than just help people survive. They helped them thrive. They became a source of strength, a quiet reminder that even in the darkest times, there is power in love, in connection, and in the simple acts of kindness that define our shared humanity. Through the bonds formed during wartime, individuals and communities learned what it truly meant to be there for one another, to offer solace when needed, and to rebuild, together, a future built on the foundation of empathy and understanding. As you drift into rest tonight, let the power of these quiet bonds settle into your heart. Let the warmth of relationships forged in the crucible of struggle wrap you in comfort. As the years pass and the pages of history turn, the lessons of wartime are often tucked away, seemingly forgotten beneath the weight of time. And yet, in the quiet moments of reflection, we realize that these lessons, though unspoken, continue to shape who we are, how we live, and the way we interact with the world around us. The war, with all its chaos and destruction, taught lessons that were not always learned in classrooms or on the battlefield. These lessons were found in the small acts of courage, in the quiet moments of strength, in the resilience that people found deep within themselves, even when everything seemed lost. Wartime taught the value of patience, of endurance. It showed us that even in the darkest times, there's always something to hold on to, whether it is the love of family, the quiet support of a community, or the simple hope that one day things will get better. It was in these moments that people found their true strength, not in the grandeur of heroic deeds, but in the quiet persistence to keep going day after day. Another lesson that wartime imparted was the importance of empathy, of truly understanding the struggles of others. During the war, soldiers fought alongside one another, not just for victory, but for the person beside them. In those moments, they learned that compassion transcends boundaries, that the shared experience of hardship can form bonds stronger than any force. On the home front, women and children learned to support one another in quiet ways, their bonds woven through acts of kindness, love, and sacrifice. The empathy that war demanded is one that, if embraced, carries forward into all aspects of life. It is the ability to see beyond oneself, to understand another's pain, and to offer help when it is needed most. It is a lesson that, though learned in times of trial, can shape the world in ways that ripple outward, creating a sense of unity and understanding across generations. War also taught the value of perseverance, the ability to push forward even when the world seems impossible. The women who ran the factories, the children who learned to cope without their fathers, and the soldiers who fought day after day, all of them carried on, often without recognition, often without rest. And through that perseverance, they forged not just victory, but an enduring hope for the future. This lesson is one that carries through to every challenge we face in life. We learn, through the quiet act of perseverance, that it is not the absence of struggle that defines us, but the courage to continue despite it. In the face of obstacles, we find our strength, not in avoiding the pain, but in accepting it and moving through it with quiet dignity and unshakable resolve. Through wartime, people also learned the value of simplicity. When the world seemed to be falling apart, it was the simple moments that became the most precious: the shared meal with family, the quiet conversations with friends, the warm embrace of a loved one. These moments, often overlooked in times of peace, became lifelines during the war. They were the small threads that held everything together. And perhaps it is this lesson, the value of simplicity, that we carry most deeply into our lives. In the rush of modern life, it's easy to forget how important it is to slow down, to savor the quiet moments. But the war taught those who lived through it to treasure those small moments, to appreciate the warmth of a shared meal, the comfort of familiar faces, and the peace that comes from being together. It is in these simple moments where the world fades away that we truly find peace. And it is in these quiet, everyday acts that the strength to endure is renewed. As the world, slowly but surely, emerges from the shadows of war, there comes a time of quiet reflection, a time when the noise of conflict fades into the distance and the world begins to breathe again. It is in these moments of peace, after the storm has passed, that we realize the true value of what we have lost, and more importantly, what we have regained. The return to peace is not always immediate. It is not a grand event, nor a dramatic transformation. Peace comes quietly, in the smallest of moments, in the warm sunlight that streams through a window, in the first tender embrace between a soldier and his family after long years of separation, in the sound of children laughing as they play outside, their carefree joy a stark contrast to the years of uncertainty that once clouded the world. Peace, in its most profound form, is often found in these simple, everyday moments. It is found in the spaces between the struggles, in the quiet spaces where life, once again, takes root and begins to flourish. After the war, the soil of the world, though scarred, is fertile once more, and from it, new beginnings sprout, new relationships, new ideas, and new hopes for a better tomorrow. For those who lived through the war, the journey back to peace is not always a smooth one. There are memories that linger, wounds that take time to heal, and changes that have to be embraced. The world they return to is different from the one they left behind. A world that has been altered by conflict, shaped by the sacrifices made, and defined by the strength of the human spirit. But in the quiet moments, when all is still, they find their way back. The soldiers who return home, their faces marked by the experiences they've lived through, come back to the embrace of those they love, carrying with them not just the weight of the past, but the hope of a future built together. The women who waited, who kept the home fires burning, are now reunited with their husbands, their fathers, and their sons, their hearts full of joy and relief. And in the spaces between their words, between their embraces, there is a shared understanding, a recognition of the struggles they have faced and the strength they have found in each other. It is in these quiet, unspoken moments of reunion that the true essence of peace is found. As life begins anew, it is marked by the quiet rhythms of daily life, the hum of the market, the sound of children playing, the warmth of a meal shared with loved ones. These are the moments that make up the tapestry of peace, the small, quiet victories that are achieved not through battle, but through the simple act of living. The communities that once came together out of necessity now find themselves coming together to rebuild not just their homes, but their lives. They rebuild their trust in one another, their belief in the possibility of a future where peace prevails. They have learned through their shared experiences that peace is fragile and it must be nurtured. It is not a one-time event, but a continuous journey, one that requires patience, empathy, and a deep commitment to one another. And in these small acts of rebuilding, peace is not only restored, it is fortified. It is found in the way a neighbor helps another, in the quiet support offered by a friend, in the understanding shared between generations. These quiet acts of kindness and love become the foundation for a world that is slowly healing. The journey back to peace is not always easy. There are challenges, there are setbacks, and there are moments when the weight of the past seems unbearable. But it is in these quiet moments of resilience that the true power of peace is realized. It is not in the absence of conflict, but in the way people choose to face adversity together, with strength, with empathy, and with unwavering resolve. For those who lived through the war, the quiet return to peace is not something they take for granted. They have seen the fragility of life, and they know that peace must be cherished. It is something to be nurtured, to be protected, and to be shared with others. And it is in these quiet, everyday moments that the world finds its way forward, one small step at a time, one act of love and care at a time.